guys, we're going to make a super simple stencil, kind of similar to what Banksy uses for some of his graffiti stencils, but on a smaller scale and kind of like hopefully a cheaper and easier version to do at home. So for that, I want just an old manila folder, like a file folder. So this is the one for our old rabbit who passed away many years ago, named Basil. We found it in our filing cabinet. And then I want an image that I got. So you can do this really simple in Photoshop, and I believe all of the Adobe products are free for students currently. Plus Fresno State has that super sweet deal where I think it's $35 a year. So if you don't have it, get it if you want it. If not, there's other sort of freeware out there, like GIMP, I think is one, which is graphic interface manipulation something or other, which is sort of similar to like an old version of Photoshop. As far as the last time I used it, it looked really similar to that. So once you have your image, you can use like different contrast filters. You can use a stamp filter on a photograph. You could just draw something that's black and white. But a stencil is a really simple image, and it's kind of like a woodcut in that it's a binary image. It's either there or not there. It's black or white. So we got our black or positives, we've got our white or negatives, and those are going to be our stencil that are actually going to block the ink passing through, whereas we're going to cut away the black areas. So I'm going to start by just getting a glue stick. And again, this could be a drawing or a printout, completely up to you. I'm just going to glue the snot out of the back of that sheet. This glue stick is old. I don't know if you guys can see that. Doesn't matter. Shouldn't be a problem. Once I got that all glue sticked, I'm just going to take my folder, push down real hard, kind of smooth it on there. I'm going to give that a few minutes to dry, and then we'll start preparing to cut. Alright, so my glue sticked piece of paper has had a couple minutes to dry to the manila file folder. And if you look at your image, when you make images like this, and again, if you look at Banksy's images or other artists who use stencils in their work, you'll notice that one of the things you have to solve is how do you connect these negative areas with the negative areas out here. Because if I cut this out and I cut the black out around in the area around it, this will just be loose and gone. And you'll see that a lot when you see text and fonts. I believe there's an example in the handout from old like military surplus equipment that has different letters, like an O where it's like kind of a half crescent and a half crescent, and there's these little bridges that connect the island here to the outer edges so that you can reuse the stencil without having to reset that piece in the middle. And it's the same with these parts here and here. This I could probably connect to there, and that's kind of part of the problem solving. And again, maybe I don't need all of those kind of wrinkles and details in my image. Maybe they're not going to add anything to it, and that becomes kind of part of the artistic expression of the artist when they're working with stencils. It becomes a choice. It's a choice that I'm going to make is going to be different than the choice that you're going to make, and that's kind of awesome because then everybody's stencil is going to be their own. So what I do if I want to make sure that I connect these things is I'll actually go and I'll draw on top of my drawing or printout with just a regular graphite pencil. For the sake of recording, I'm going to use a little white pencil that I had so it's a little bit easier to see, and we'll kind of just go from there. Went ahead and shifted the camera around because I'm right-handed, and I thought rather than looking at the back of my hand, you can see the front of my hand. Here's a time lapse with the white pencil, creating those bridges and connections for my sort of floating islands of stencil. If I don't connect them, they'll just pull away or fall away after I've cut out the black areas around them. So another way to do a stencil or to use a stencil is to use acetate, which was a traditional part of the tattooing technique way back in the day is that they would cut stencils out of acetate and then push charcoal onto the skin to map out where the tattoo was going to go. So before they would even start to make the tattoos, they would have to, come up with the drawing, sit down and cut an acetate with really thin, fine lines to let the material, the charcoal or graphite to pass through. And they could reuse the acetate over and over again, which is why pre-designed tattoos generally are and were cheaper than a brand new tattoo, which, with a new drawing, a new design. The materials we're using aren't nearly as sturdy when it comes to wet media as acetate, because acetate's a synthetic, like plastic material, and other cultures would use, like leaves to tear or cut stencils through. The Romans used kind of like a parchment paper type material that was like a waxed papyrus. Chinese or Asian cultures often used like a Asian paper that had been soaked in like a lacquer or resin to make it longer lasting. A lot of you guys probably don't have access to that at home. I don't either. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to use some packing tape. So I'm going to do that real quick. I'm just going to throw some packing tape over my stencil that I've drawn back into a Sharpie and white pencil to kind of help map out the areas where I want those little bridges or ties to hold my image in place. And yeah, let's do that real quick. So this is just regular old cheap packing tape. You saw me just make a mistake there. So I'm going to go ahead and go off the edge. Some of you guys maybe don't have a cutting mat at home to work on like I'm working on right now. Often what I would do is use the back of my old drawing boards or newsprint boards or pads, sorry, or an old sketchbook might have a chipboard back. In times of desperation, I've also taken to using cereal boxes, just breaking the box down and laying that flat so that I have a surface to cut against, so I'm not cutting my table or carpet or whatever. And then I can just go ahead and cut that tape loose. And so all the tape's really doing is it's just protecting our image. Now obviously you could use acetate or mylar or duralar if you bought that for the semester or have access to it for some other reason. With the acetate you can just see through it, so you would just lay it on top of your image and cut through it to your image. And then for multiple layers you would just layer one acetate on top of another acetate, or just a new sheet on top of your original drawing. So we've got our taped image on our manila folder, which the tape might hold that down a little bit, but it should open like that. And that's going to help us do a multicolor in a couple minutes.